Okay. Hello, welcome. This will be the final, this will be the last part of Edmund Burke. And what what we are trying to do today is that we are going to very quickly finish up and maybe finish up this. It's going on for too long, and there's no point dwelling over the same thing over and over again. So okay, so picking up where we left off. Last time in the previous lecture, we were talking about how the French Revolution, right? The French Revolution was influenced by thinkers such as Rousseau and Voltaire, right? And we also learned how the ideas have shaped the spirit of the French Revolution. So we also discuss and we also discuss why Burke was against such idealizing of ideas, right? Maybe that's the right maybe that is not the right word, but then I think that kind of encapsulates what Burke was speaking of. You see, you can't really treat reality as some abstract ideal. You may have certain good ideas about how a society ought to be, but we must also realize that when you try to implement such um, ideas in the reality cannot simply conform to it, right? You cannot make the reality conform to your ideal. That is one of the main limitations of today's modern academic thoughts or academia, right? That's it's rife. Today's modern academic life or academia is rife, is like absolutely rife with this theoretical thinking, right? Which does not really conform to the reality. You see, it is the reality which is independent of ideas, right? But then what happens is that nowadays in academia, more or less, you make reality conform to your ideal, right? And if you don't believe me, check out numerous articles and publications which are being uh, minted, right? Which are being printed and minted from all the universities across the world, and then you find that the what they speak of is totally irrelevant to the realities of the world. So that's one of the limitations, and that's precisely what Burke was speaking of when he was trying to pinpoint and say, you see, these are the ideas of thinkers, Voltaire, Rousseau, whatnot, and they were the intellectual flame, or they were the intellectual spirit, or they were the spirit that flamed the French Revolution. But in trying to bring the reality, right, in order to bring to reality the ideals which they have into reality, is vastly different. The reality is not what you think it is, right? So what Burke was trying to convey was that society and its existing institutions and systems, as well as the many problems that plagues the society, cannot be understood, nor should they be taken in an ahistorical sense, right? Without history, everything is intricately connected to each other. Where a simple change, where a simple change here will inevitably, right, necessitate a change, will necessitate a change where change was not intended, or where change was not intended. The existing laws and institutions of society, Berg is suggesting, that it grows organically, right, out of the particular society's history and experiences, right? And these are the experiences that give rise to habits and norms and mores and values, which are predicated, right? Which are predicated, or they are the consequences of the society's nesting in that lengthy period of history, right? And this sort of experiences, they entail a lot of practical wisdom, right? They tell us what to do, what not to do. It's not simply everything about the past is narrow, or everything about the past is irrelevant, or everything about the past is prejudice in a negative sense, right? It's bad, but it's not. What Burke is saying is that the experiences of the past, right, they teach us how to deal with situations, right? because we must understand the context in which we live, right? Even in a society which you want to bring change, right? Maybe there's something that you want to bring change in your own society, right? That means you can't just simply copy paste a solution from an alien or from a foreign society, which is vastly different, right? Culturally and socially, vastly different from yours. And last time we spoke of democracy, for instance, democracy, right? Right. So for Burke, any change, and because if you are wise and if you are judicious, then any proposed change in law or institutions or in the structure of the society, you need to commence, right? You need to commence by presenting that there is this indubitable need for change. Like change is necessary, like it must change because of changing a change of times. You may have to change, and that what you are going to change will actually solve the problem which you're trying to deal, right? So but what Berg is saying is that in order to do that, in order to bring about the change, but to bring about the change in a judicious and in a prudent manner, you must make use of the existing experiences that you have, right? In other words, consider and study the social, cultural context in which you dwell, in which you live, right? Even the historical context in which you are dealing the problem, right? You must understand that. You must not only so for Berg, you must not just simply go for change, right? And he says that if you are, and obviously I'm quoting him, well, what he says is that if you are a statesman, a prudent statesman, then you would not only want to change, but then for you, there must be a disposition of disposition of how to preserve and also improve at the same time, right? That's what you're supposed to do, right? Not just completely root out everything, but then you must not only preserve but also bring about improvement. If you think something is wrong and something if you want to change or reform, change is not the right word, but if you want to reform your society for better, then you must not only preserve what is best, but also bring about, by reforming, improve upon the existing system or existing institutions or culture or norms or whatever, right? So such views are not, in a sense, are not alien or not foreign, right? Not alien, nor could they be considered as an outlier or a peculiar or peculiar, precisely because Burke grasped the organic nature of society, right? Organic nature of society, and this is a sentiment. This sentiment or this underlying assumption he shares with Aristotle, right? Like Aristotle, Burke saw human society or human beings as social creature, right? And it was Aristotle who says, "Man, humans are social animal, right? Human beings are social creature in which their rights, their liberties, right, and then their institutions, and indeed their very mode of thinking were were determined by the society in which they live, right? You see, you must pay attention to this when you think of organic nature of a society, right? That means what he's saying is that human beings are a social creature in which the very concept of what is right or what constitutes rights or what constitutes liberty or what is a good institution, what is a good law, and indeed the very mode of thinking, right, are determined by the society in which you live. And that is very true because the kind of, you see, that's why you see, I mean, it's very apparent, it's very obvious if you have traveled to, say, for instance, any Western society, right, in Western Europe, America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or go to China or India, right, travel anywhere, and you will see precisely what we are speaking of. You see, because when you go to, say, for instance, in the United States, they are very the Western, I mean, it's Americans, right? The way they think, the way they perceive the world, the way they think about everything, about life itself, the way they view things, is very, in a sense, it's very idealistic. It's very ideal, right? And it's very, and because also because the society in which they live is very certain, right? I mean, of course, there are uncertainties in life, but then more or less, most mundane issues of life are quite certain, and hence that kind of defines the way they view the world. Very optimistic persons, I would say, very optimistic society. And you go to China or you go to India, then you will see people really don't care about ideas in India, here in India, or if you go to China, or even here in Nagaland, right? We don't really care about ideas, right? We just don't care. We only care about survival, right? What what will enable me to survive throughout this day? What will make me survive? What will enable me to feed my family, right? So in such kind of society, there's no room for thinking about the ideal, right? There's no room for that. And that kind of colors, right? That colors the way you view the world, you understand the world, right? So there's no way that. That's why in most cases people in Western societies, they have difficult time understanding people in India or people in China, right? They can't understand right now precisely. United States cannot understand China. Why? Because look at the way they view the world. It's very vastly different. Much in the same way, even much of the Western people don't understand the way Indians are. Why? Because look at the way look at the context in which we live. There's nothing whatsoever that is related to the way they think. It's vastly different, right? It's vastly different. I don't care about ideas or how to make the society better, right? In India, you don't, because most people are struggling to survive, and more or less, it's what the majority of the people think that kind of determines the view of the world that you have, right? So much in the same way, Burke was saying, you see, because we are social creatures, the very concept of rights and even the liberties and even the very mode of our thinking is dependent on the society in which we live. As such, society is conceived as a mutually interdependent set of institutions and tradition that includes the individual within these sets of connection, right? It's similar to, like, for instance, the organs of our body, right? How the manner in which the various organs of our body are intricately connected within this one single person, right? So so Burke uses this example, this how the organs of the body are connected within the one single organism. So much in the same way, Burke he was at pains to show that just as a change or alteration in one organ of the body, right, must necessarily cause change in the rest, likewise, the similar result can occur when alteration is made in certain aspect of a social body, right? Whenever you make a certain change over here in this aspect of society, then changes, right, results, changes happens not only over here where you intended, but also somewhere else too, right? You got my point? Somewhere else too. So in other words, change in one part of the society will invariably lead to corresponding alteration in other parts of the society, right? And and those changes will seldom be anticipated. We would not have thought that, by making changes over here, it would cause such a dramatic change elsewhere, right? You see, maybe I'll give you an example as to what we're speaking of. You see, for instance, when in India, for instance, here in India, we have a caste system, right? Caste system. The Brahmins, the priestly class, the priestly caste, and the warrior, the Kshatriyas, and then you have the Sudras, and then you have the untouchables, or whatnot, right? So people in the lower ladder of the caste system, the untouchables, right? The Sudras. The untouchables, people in India may think about, okay, there are some people who the untouchables who seek some sort of social justice, right? Because they are being excluded politically, they have no political power, no social power, no economic power, and in all those spheres of life, they are alienated, they are excluded. Now, there are people in India who very very naively, I would say they're naive, very naively says that, okay, now we must get rid of the caste system, right? Simple. But then when people think that we must just simply get rid of the caste system, then they view the society as an alienated, but like an isolated atom, right? In other words, they think that social institutions, different parts of a society are not connected, that they live individually, like an individual atom, right? So they don't see any connection. Hence, when they see society in a very mechanical sense, right? If they have an inorganic view of the society, they think that everything exists independent of each other. one branch of society is independent of another. In other words, religion is independent of politics, is independent of the cultural context, is independent of the historical context, is independent of the economic context. They see that way. But then what Burke is saying is that no, you cannot see it that way, right? Of course, let me get back to the issue. I'm just digressing here. But so when in India, when people naively claim that okay, of course, I'm all for power for the discriminated people, but then when people say okay, we must get rid of the caste system, when they say that, it tells me that okay, those people who say that we must just simply get rid of the caste system, they see society as an inorganic body. They see society in a very mechanical they see society as a mechanical society, right? Very mechanical, in the mechanical phenomena, not an organic one, because they see each part of society to be different, right? To exist independently of each other. So they simply say that we must simply get rid of the caste system. But then the problem is you can't just simply get rid of the caste system, right? You can't. When you say you get rid of the caste system, then you will affect religion, because in India majority of the people are Hindu, right? So the caste system is inherently is an inherent part of the Hindu religion, right? The caste system. The caste system is inherently part of the religion. So, in other words, by saying you have to get rid of the caste system, then are you also saying that you must also get rid of religion? In other words, what you're saying is when people say simply get rid of the caste system, then you're also saying get rid of religion. Because you are, even if you don't want to touch religion, you are going to touch religion by simply getting rid of the caste system. It will have a consequences. It will have an effect. It will have an alteration in the nature of religion itself in India, right? Where billions of people worship or follow, or they follow the Hindu religion, right? Of course, the BJP will be so the BJP party in India will be so devastated. I'm just kidding, no, but still, right? You are going to affect the way religion functions as well. You're not only getting rid of the caste system, which is an inherent part of Hindu religion, but you're also going to get rid of religion, which may not, I'm not saying whether it's a good or bad thing to get rid of religion, but it will have an effect. And in many sense, it will have a negative effect, right? It will. Whether we like it or not, religion, you see, you like it or not, you need religion. Why? Not because I'm all, but because not everything in life is about, in life you need some sort of the divine in your life, right? That you do need that. I mean, of course. I mean, if you live in a Western society, what would you care about all these things? But if you don't, if you live in like in a developing country like India or China, you will know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So there you go. So, but then nevertheless, by simply saying get rid of the caste system, you're saying okay. You think that just by removing the caste system, everything will go fine. No, that's not, and that's precisely what Burke is saying. You see, this organic nature is what the liberals, right, of the French Revolution, and also the classical liberalism of Lockean tradition, right? This organic nature is what the liberals did not grasp, did not understand, because the liberals viewed society as a collection of independent power-seeking bodies or individuals, right? They saw individuals or aspects of society as an independent atom, right? An isolated atom, independent of each other, totally disconnected from each other, concerned only to accumulate property and power and to secure one's self-interest. That's what the liberals tradition saw society to be and the individuals to be, right? This mechanical view that sees society to be a mere sum of its individual part perniciously view the world in a very atomistic, right? Atomistic manner, where the complex reality and its subtle nuances are standardized and generalized to a simple equation of problems and solutions, right? Yeah, of problems and solutions. You see, so So Burke argues that it is for this reason, this very mechanical view of the liberals, right, that the revolutionaries could not grasp the perniciousness of their ideal when they decided to eradicate and purge the old system of aristocracy, right? They saw, okay, aristocracy is bad. So, in other words, simply how do you make the system good? Simply get rid of aristocracy, right? But then, in doing so, they view the world in a very mechanical sense. They view the world as isolated group of atoms, totally independent of each other. When in reality, Burke is arguing, when in reality they are not. They are intricately linked to one another. You can't just simply get rid of aristocracy and expect things not to change elsewhere. If you change the aristocracy, things will show up. That changes will occur not where you expect it, right? And not in the manner that which and not in the manner which you seek. You won't even get the solution what you're asking for, the result what you're asking for. So, so Burke is saying, right? So he's arguing. So what he's saying is that the revolutionaries could not grasp the perniciousness of the ideal, right? When they decided to literally destroy and purge the old system of aristocracy. Because, for instance, in order to establish what he's saying, that because the revolutionaries thought, right, in order to establish equality of rights, right, the ideal, right, equality of rights, they saw society to be constituted of distinct, separable, and independent components, right, that are unrelated to one another, right? In other words, they viewed society as independent. These revolutionaries could not comprehend that, given their atomistic, isolated, right, mechanical, given their atomistic view of society, that aristocracy, right, the revolutionaries failed to understand. The revolutionaries failed to understand that the aristocracy, like any other social class or institution, was intertwined, right? Was intricately connected, interdependent with all other institutions, right? So all these institutions together, because they're intricately linked, they had this shared foundation, right? They all of these institutions were the shared foundation and the sole basis of the existence of their political rights, of liberties, right? In other words, what gave legitimacy to the government and what made their society rational and ordered, right? Because the revolutionaries could not comprehend this intricate and interdependent nature of the society, in fact of the aristocracy, how the aristocratic system was linked with all other systems in the society, right? They thought the best way to get rid of them, the best way to make the society equal, is to just simply get rid of it. And by doing so, right, and by doing so, it brought about consequences and results which they did not anticipate, right? They anticipated, okay, once you get rid of the aristocracy, everything will fall in its place, everything will be fine, and there will be lovey-dovey everywhere, right? But that was not the case. You removed the aristocracy. By removing it, you created unintended consequences elsewhere in the form, elsewhere in the society, right? It created problems, it created changes which the revolutionaries did not anticipate, right? That created more problems for the revolutionaries, right? And in the end, they had to resort to violence, right? To make sure they had to resort these revolutionaries because they did not anticipate all these things, and they were foolish enough not to see the intricate realities, that in the end they had to resort to violence and bloodshed just so that their revolutionary will not fail. But in the end, it did fail, right? It gave rise to Napoleon, right? Same thing. You see, for example, same thing. I mean, we can relate this example, what Burke is saying, in today's world or today's reality. For example, in India, right, where you buy votes during elections, right, um, or you have, for instance, um, um, where you have this, where you have not just the buying of votes, but the system of patronage, right? The system of patronage or the corruption, right? So all these things, if you think about it, you can't just simply say that, okay, just simply, we should, like for instance, here in Nagaland, right? Because we are Nagaland. So let me talk about Nagaland. Here in Nagaland, during elections. Politicians, politicians spend lots of money, right? They spend lots of money during elections to win, right? Now the thing is this: if you are one of those idealistic reformer, right, like Burke is saying, and then now what would you do now? Now you know that there are like politicians, they use a lot of money to buy votes, right? They give you money for your votes, right? Politicians spend, they spend a lot during elections. So you are, say for instance that you are this reformer, right? This idealistic reformer. How would you go about dealing with this, right? Now Burke would tell you that, you see, yeah, I know you don't like the way politicians spend money during elections in order to buy votes from you, right? In other words, you sell your votes to the politician, right? So you may think, okay, simply you may think that, okay, you know what, there will be, I'm going to make sure that there's, from next election onwards, none of the politicians will use money. But the thing is, how are you going to do that, right? How are you going to make the politicians, or how are you going to make the intending candidates, right, not use money, right? How are you going to do that? Now you may say, okay, you know what, from now on, in what Burke would tell you is this. What Burke would tell you is simply this. You see, before you try to go and do things, try to change things, right, reform things, right, just like the NBCC, right? NBCC here in Nagaland, they said clean election, right? What was the idea behind the clean election, right? Where there will no longer be, use of money, use of money during elections, right? That the politicians will not spend money, and the voters themselves will not sell their votes for money, right? But then the thing is did the clean election campaign started by NBCC succeed? The answer is no, right? The answer is no. In fact, in fact, more money was spent this general election 2 years ago, right, than before, right? So actually, this clean election campaign was an utter failure. And for Burke, it's very simple, right? Very simple. Because Burke will tell you, before you go and try to act holy and thou is morally higher than you, right? Before you try to show your higher morality, right, you must understand the social context. People in Nagaland are not very, we are not a developed society, right? We still live in a very traditional society. And most of the people in Nagaland, they live below poverty line, right? And most of the population in Nagaland are rural, right? Close to 60% or 70% of the population in Nagaland live in rural areas, right? So in the rural areas, you have you have modernity have totally destroyed the old system, the old traditional system that sustained life, right? There is like literally no employment opportunity. Life is pathetic in rural areas. So it is only during the months of elections, it's only during the election years that they get to get some money from the politicians for free, right? Because why? Because they're struggling to live, they're struggling to survive, right? You got my point? So this is precisely why the NBCC clean election campaign was an utter miserable failure, right? Failure, precisely because they did not care about the majority of the, they did not care about the living conditions, the context, the social context, the historical context in which most of the people in Nagaland lived, right? Hence it never worked, and it will never work unless you raise the living standards of the people in the rural areas and give them employment opportunities and whatnot. Maybe, but before you do that, there is no point trying to change the way politics is done here in Nagaland, right, or in India itself, right? So same thing. That's what those things first. Understand those things first. So that's what Burke was saying. So at this juncture, so that's what Burke was saying, that before you go and change things, you try to understand the context in which you live in, right? So that's what he was saying. So at this juncture, you may be wondering, why is Burke on and on and on about defending the existing institution, right? And why is Burke going on and on about defending the existing situation and the reformation rather than supporting the removal of the class system, which is unfair, obviously unfair and parasitical to its people. But yet, we must try to rein in our advantages of hindsight, right? And we must direct our attention towards this implication of if we dismiss Burke's cautions or take what Burke is cautioning us for granted, right? When the revolutionaries, for instance, decided to purge the aristocratic class system in France, right, during the revolution, during the French Revolution, when they decided to purge the aristocratic class system with the pretext that with the pretext of establishing equal rights, they were not only removing what they deemed as unfair and unjust system, but they were also tearing down one of the one of the barriers against excesses of despotism or the rise of tyrannical force. You see, Burke understood more so than anyone, right, that placing when you give political powers in the hands of the people, right, in the name of rights and equality, with no reciprocal duty, this will only lead to an instability of society, right? This will only lead to instability, right? Because it will create instability precisely because when you do that, it will create it will create instability where those who feel excluded in the new society or in the new system will plot and conspire against those who are in power, right? Whom they deem to be unfit to be in power or rule or bring to fruition or the realization of the revolutionary ideals. And for the same reason, those who are in power will opt for preventive actions against those who are trying to dispose them of the power. You see, so this plotting, right, and contempt and conspiration goes on and on because you see, it's never a good idea. Burke is saying, which, if you think about it, he's kind of right. Never a good idea to place in the hands of the people. Here you go, political power, and not expect people to act responsibly because they will not. When you give a group of people who did not exercise political rights and give them the ultimate freedom, here you go, you have the political freedom, but by giving political freedom, if you don't also give them the responsibility, right? If you don't say, okay, just because you have these rights, you also have these duties. If you don't give them the duties, corresponding duties, they will bring the society to ruins, right? That's what all democratic society will come to, right? All democratic society will nevertheless fall apart precisely because of this, right? That's why, for instance, in India, right, here in India, in the Indian constitution, right, it gives the citizen of India fundamental rights, right? Fundamental rights which the government can never infringe upon, right? They will never interfere with those rights. But also, if you read carefully, it also tells you, right? You have fundamental rights, but also you have fundamental duties. You see, you can't expect just rights. Just talk about, oh, the rights about this excluded group of people, like it's happening in most Western countries, or rights to these people, this group of people, these people, right, to this class of people, this group of people, this religion, this people of sexual orientation. That's just that's just mind-blowingly, stupid, right? If you only talk about rights, and if you don't talk about the duties, then you are in a mess. Your society is in a mess, precisely, and that will bring some sort of of decay of the whole social structure itself, right? It will because when you have rights, you also have duties. I'm your teacher, right? Just because I'm a teacher and I teach, I'm a faculty, I teach, does not mean that I have the utmost right to do whatever I want with regards to the life or with regards to what I can do within the realm of this academic university, right? Within the university, but I also have duties, right? As a faculty, it is my duty to make sure that my students, they get the best teaching possible, right? The best knowledge possible, right? I have to give my very best. I cannot just take things for granted, right? I cannot. I have certain duties towards my students. You got my point, right? You see, so rights and duties, they go together. But then what happened was that in French Revolution, people just talked about rights, liberty, equality, and then no duties, right? And that is precisely what is happening in America or in Western European countries. They talk a lot about rights, right? But they don't talk about duties. Now that's the mistake, right? That's a big mistake. And trust me, one day these things will go and bite them in their back. Trust me on this. And this will create a huge social problem in America or in Western European countries, which is bound to happen. And every day it's coming closer and closer and closer. People just talk about rights, not duties. Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts. So, so what Burke is saying. So what Burke understood more than his contemporaries, and more so even now, is that these social distinctions, right? These social distinctions, such as social class or social group or religious orders and so on, they check the central power because each of them, like each social group or classes, possess its own authority, right? This is very similar to the observation made by Montesquieu and also by Cicero, right? Made of the Roman Republic. Because both these thinkers, Montesquieu and Cicero, they stated that the existing class partisan, right? The partisan conflict, the class competition in the Roman Republic was not bad, but it was actually good. Why was it good? The answer was the existence of this class conflict was good precisely because it limited the immoderation, right? It limited the insatiable need of tyrannical power, right? In other words, their competition checked upon the tendencies of they checked upon the tendencies for any particular group to concentrate the power in their hands, right? In other words, they made sure that no single group or no single individual or no single person will will concentrate all the state power in its hand, because what happens is that once you have more power, power corrupts here, right? It was Lord Acton's, right? Lord Acton, the dictum by Lord Acton, he says, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So like that. So because Montesquieu and Cicero and more or less Burke, they were quite they were quite aware of the fact that power has this tendency to corrupt people. Even the best of man, the best of group, it corrupts, right? So much in the same way. So Burke, likewise, Cicero and Montesquieu were saying that you need this social distinction, right? Social classes. Why? Because it makes sure that there is no chances for any one group to concentrate power in a single entity, right? That was very very essential. So likewise, Burke was making a similar argument, right? For he reasoned that each of these groups, right, each of these groups in French Revolution, like all this aristocracy, the royal family, the church, the peasants, or the general public, and then the bourgeoisie, right? They were the rising class, right? It was necessary to have different kinds of social classes, right? Why? Because these groups resisted encroachment upon each right or each jurisdiction or each authority by another group, right? In other words, each composed a strong barrier or an obstacle against the extremes of tyranny, right? Of a despot. So when you get rid of these social distinctions or social institutions that has class divisions, right? When you get rid of these class divisions, which actually serve as a blockade against the tyrannical tendencies, right, or the centralization of power, when you get rid of these social distinctions, by getting rid of the social distinctions, you also get rid of the blockade wall against the tyrannical tendencies. What happens is that whenever you get rid of that, you give you make sure that by getting rid of these social distinctions, you make sure that power becomes that the tendencies for tyranny becomes more real, right? The chances of 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 the comments of the installation of a tyrannical power or a tyrannical entity becomes even more evident once you get rid of these social distinctions. Because why? Because social distinctions were a strong barricade, were a strong obstacle against this central tyrannical tendencies, right, to arise. So what happened is that these various associations or social distinctions that comprised the society not only resisted encroachment upon their prescription, upon their own traditional jurisdiction, but when you destroy these entities, these distinctions, what happened is that it created what is known as the, in Burke's own words, you create a homogeneous mass. You see, now this is one thing that I want you to that I really want you to take a note of. Burke was actually one of the first thinkers to see these effects of mass society, of a modern mass society. And if you think about it, the French Revolution actually gave rise to what we now know as the mass society, right? The mass society, mass, like, huge, not just diverse masses, but then homogeneous. Everything is same, right? In modern society, if you think about it, in modern society, everything is the same. There's no difference. Everything is same. What you get here in India, you find it in China, or you find it in Western Europe, or in Australia, or in America, or in New Zealand, right? You find it, right? You find Apple phone, right? Same thing. You'll find the same Apple phone elsewhere, right? Even this chair, right? You'll find it. Even the phone, this laptop, the pen, the books, same thing. You'll find everywhere else. It's not unique. It's a homogeneous mass, right? That's what mass society is. Everything is freely available. Nothing is unique. So it creates what happens is that when you utterly destroy these distinctions, first of all, you create this mass society. And what happens in a mass society? In a mass society, you as an individual, you are alone, you are faceless, you are nobody, you are easily replaceable. You think you are special, you are not. Just like I can go and replace a pen which I have right now, right? Much in the same way, you think this pen is unique? Of course not. You go to any shop in town and you'll find thousands and thousands of the same pen, right? So we as individuals in a mass society become like this pen, a useless, a replaceable. Nothing is unique about this. It's the same everywhere, right? It writes the same, everything is the same. Same company made it. Nothing is unique about it. Nothing is special, right? But what Burke is saying, whether you like it or not, whenever you did have these social distinctions, class distinctions, or whatever, right? At least you meant something, right? You were not just an isolated, faceless individual, an isolated atom. You were not an isolated atom. You were well connected to your social groups, right? Your social groups gave you support in times of need and challenges, right? But now in the mass society, you are nobody. You see, and that's why tyranny becomes more possible, right? Tyranny becomes all the more what do you call it? The chances, it gets high. The chances of tyranny to be imposed upon a mass society becomes very very high, and that's what Burke was saying. So, but then again, what Burke is also trying to say is that it is not surprising that the revolutionaries, right, that the French Revolution brought about the establishment of mass society, because why? Because he would say, Burke would say, because of their view, the liberal view, right? Where because they view the society as an individual, isolated atoms, isolated individuals or institutions, totally living separately from each other. There's no connection, right? That was the view of Hobbes and Locke and Rousseau, right? That saw individuals and other social institutions as independent, discrete, and separate from one another, right? They saw they saw that it is perfectly acceptable to put or to place political power in the hands of the people, right? Whom these revolutionaries and the liberals saw these human beings as rational. You see, that's another mistake. They saw these human beings, this mass of people, to be rational human beings, and they thought because they are rational man, right, rational human beings, they are able to establish states where these rational men seek to preserve their lives, their liberty, and their property or estates, right? But not knowing that these presumed rational beings were in fact isolated, lonely, faceless, powerless, and demoralized human beings, right? Demoralized human beings. So, how can these feeble, isolated and demoralized masses of individuals stand in the way of these central tendencies of power, right? This tendency for the concentration of power, right, in the hands of one person or one group of people, right? It becomes there's nothing. If you are individual, if you are a feeble, isolated individual, helpless individual, how can you stand in the way? How can you stand in the way of this enormity of tyrannical power that comes your way? You can't. I feel like this, and again, this is very, very prominent in modern mass democracies. People think that mass democracies are good, but no, it's not. Actually, mass democracies are a way, are a step towards tyranny, right? They are because one of the lies of democracy is this, right? One of the lies of democracy is this. They say, "Oh, your vote matters, right? Every vote counts." Really? Think about it. Really? I know for sure my vote counts for nothing, right? Your vote counts for something, really? In democracy, where you have thousands and millions of people, and you think that one pathetic single vote of yours will make a difference? Of course not. It's a lie, right? It's a lie. So much in the same, right? How can you stop? That's precisely the point of Burke about mass society. How can you, as a single, weak, hopeless, feeble, demoralized individuals stand in the way of this tyranny, right? You can't. You think you have a say. That's one of the lies of democracy. Or your vote counts. No, your vote does not count. The result is already decided even before you vote, right? You a single a single individual does not matter, right? You don't matter. I don't matter. My vote does not count, right? Your vote does not count. So stop thinking that your vote matters, right? So stop voting. No, no, no. It's up to you, but but just think about it, right? so 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 that's why so like Burke was saying, the revolutionaries unwittingly paved the way for the creation of mass society, right? Which is very, very evident from the French Revolution, with this doctrine of rights of man, whatever that rights is, that natural rights is. And so because the very doctrine of the revolutionaries in the French Revolution, right? Because the very doctrine of the very dictum of the French Revolution was rights of man, and this equality of rights of man, these rights are inherently opposed to the social distinctions that existed hitherto, right? All the social distinctions, even say for instance in India, the caste system, all this caste system or the class division in the Western societies, they they are opposed, right? These ideas of class distinction and caste system is inherently opposed to the idea of equality, right? So when you remove these class distinctions, what is there to keep you stranded on the ground? What is your roots then? You are no longer a person with roots. Even though, and this is precisely the point of Burke, you see, yeah, of course, the caste system is not good. Who would say the caste system is good? Yeah, right? But then within the caste system, you are not an isolated, a feeble, weakless, hopeless, pathetic individual, right? You are not a single isolated person. You are connected to your social group, right? That gives you comfort, that helps you, that aids you, that gives you meaning in life, no matter how pathetic your life may be, right? However, once you remove all of these distinctions, then you no longer have a root. You are all alone by yourself, right? Yes, you are free. You are equal. Everybody is equal. Then what? Then what? What is there to root you? What is there to give you meaning? Where is the social safety net? There's no social safety net. At least in at least for at least in caste system, even an untouchable person has some sort of safety net, right? Safety net, family, their social group. But in a mass society, you, an independent person with equality and liberty, you are alone. You have no social safety net. That's why in Western societies, right, they care a lot about social safety net to be provided by the government, right? You see, there you go, right? Think about it. This is why Burke is saying The revolutionaries wrongly believed that the social distinctions was a necessary condition for tyranny, right? And it went against the rights of man. Hence, the only way to bring about equality is to dismantle the social distinctions, the caste system, whatnot, right? Is to dismantle it and try to institute equality, right? So this, but then the thing is, they thought about these things, right? That's what they did. That's what they did actually. The revolutionaries. They went about dismantling all the social distinctions. But then they did not succeed in realizing their goal. Their goals, their revolutionary ideals, even when they resorted to use of violence, right, by the Jacobin, right, they did not succeed. It failed, right? Not only did they not realize, but they also created the mass society, right? They created a master society that constituted of that the society, the mass society comprised of isolated, faceless individual, right? Really, you go and stand among. If you don't believe me, you go and stand among. You go to a concert, right? Obviously nowadays so you can't because of coronavirus, right? Thanks to coronavirus. But then if you did, you go and watch sports, for instance, football, right? Of course, football. You know what I mean by football, right? Only in America it's called football. I don't know what's called, but in the rest of the world, soccer is called football. So you go to a football match and then you watch. I cannot even differentiate you from the crowd because you are faceless, right? You become like that. That's what mass society is. So the more the revolutionaries, the more the liberal ideas, the liberal tradition emphasize the individual, right, with his subsequent rights and liberties over and above everything else, right? The more they emphasize the individual and the rights and liberties and all that idealistic nonsense, the more the individual is torn away from the social fabric from the social fabric that gave him some sort of meaning to his life, right? Some sort of roots on which to ground his life. So what happens is that once you do that, you turn a very yes, you turn a helpless person. You turn a person into a helpless person, isolated and lonely, right? Very, very lonely human beings. I'm sure if you just think about it, that's why you're on the internet, right? You're on the YouTube. So you feel isolated, right? So so what happens is that they give you they emphasize the revolutionaries, the emphasis on rights and liberty of the individual encourage the development of mass society and the image of a centralized tyranny, right? They gave rise to tyranny that only made a mockery of those rights which actually gave rise to it. In other words, like Burke was saying that your revolution will have a master, right? That's what he was saying, and indeed, that's what happened. When the revolutionaries did not see the intricate organic nature of society, organic nature of human beings, and saw human beings and society as isolated atoms, right? They torn away all the barricades against tyranny. They tore it away, gave rise to isolated individuals who can't resist the power of tyranny, right? And with the rise of tyranny, it only made a mockery of the revolutionary ideals, right? Right? And indeed, the words of Burke was right. Your revolution, quotation, your revolution will have a master. Truly, that master was Napoleon, right? So you see, it is essential to remind ourselves that Burke's ideas and political thoughts, they constituted not only a stark criticism of liberal ideals, but also more importantly, and retrospectively speaking, if you actually think about it, it's a damning critique on ideological thinking, right? This is something that we have to actually think about it, and it's quite interesting to note that ideology. We think that ideology is good, but then trust me, it's not good. It makes you more stupid, right? So Burke grasped that such mode of ideological thinking, right, presents a novel and dangerous form of political thoughts and actions that we now usually distinguish and identify that what we now identify as ideology, right? Because you see, the rise of ideology, it actually starts at this period, at precisely this period, what this period of the French Revolution, right? The term called ideology, right, or the ideologue, right? They were the not the consequences, but they did play a role, right? We see the concept of ideology, we see the rise of ideologues precisely at this time during the French Revolution, right? They were trying to bring about changes in the society in a scientific manner, right? Apply the scientific principles in the study of society, and then that's why they call it ideology, right? Like biology. Okay. And this was the so Burke foreshadowed, not he didn't foreshadow, but then he saw like clearly more than his friends, and even now, people, even now, he foreboded that okay, now we have a very novel, very new, but dangerous form of political thoughts and actions, right? And what he was saying was that what made this ideology, this mode of thinking, dangerous or omnious is its worldview, right? It's the way it views the world, right? And what is so dangerous about the worldview, or what is so omnious about its worldview, ideology, right? What is so dangerous about the ideological worldview, Marxism, capitalism, or communism, or all that, whatever ideology? What made their worldview dangerous was that such kind of, no matter what kind of ideology, it provided a simple, undemanding, all encompassing, right, view of the world, right? It provided an abstract, all inclusive, right, a universal political and social principle upon which the world is to be viewed and understood, right? It provided a lens. It provided one single narrow lens, a very simplified lens through which to view the world, like this lens, right? I cannot see right now, but then an ideological view would be like, I see it clearly now, right? You see, but then who knows? This lens may be narrow, right? May disregard many of the important things, right? So much in the same way, Burke was saying, you see, this is one dangerous view about a dangerous thing about this ideological view is that it provides a lens, a very narrow lens through which to view and understand the world, right? And it's only through this lens that the world is to be understood, right? The society is to be judged from this lens, right? Problems, right? No matter how complex, multifaceted, demanding, and interdependent they may be, these problems are to be understood. These complex problems are to be understood from a universal, right? Equality, liberty, whatnot, from the universal valid principle upon which the ideology is structured, and the solution which it claims is simple, right, can be realized by establishing society structured on the universally valid principles. And that's what precisely what all the ideologies do, right? Be it Marxism, socialism, communism, or more or less they're the same thing, but not the same, but they're more or less the same. Capitalism, right? All that anarchical view, or whatever the view may be, globalization. Democracy is an ideology too, actually, right? Yeah, actually, yes, democracy is an ideology, right? So it provides this very, it simplifies the world. All the complexities is removed. This is the problem. This is how we can change it, right? This is the problem. You want things to be better? Get rid of this. Everything will be fine. That's ideology, right? So judged from this ideological lens, right, the actual and the manifest world, the actual world is always found wanting, right? You judge the real world, you judge the actual world from this lens. That something is wrong. Of course, it's still that's why it's called the world. Nothing is perfect, right? Everything is something is always missing. But then from the ideological lens, it will tell you something is wrong. Something is found wanting, right? Something is it falls short of perfection of the ideology which the ideology proselytize or promotes or espouse, right? So in the face of such abstract and universal principles, the ideologues, right, they believe in the absolute rightness of their doctrine, right? The absolute rightness of they cannot be wrong. That's what they say. Marxism cannot be wrong. Liberalism cannot be wrong. Capitalism cannot be wrong. Democracy, democracy cannot be wrong. Yes, democracy can be wrong, and it's wrong. Trust me. Democracy cannot be wrong. And anyone who disagrees with your ideology is evil, right? Is an enemy to humanity. And that's precisely what the world is, right? That's what precisely what the world has become. That's ideology. Whenever you look at democracy, oh, democracy is good. Hence, every country in the world must be democratic. If anyone says they are against democracy, oh, you are evil. You are against humanity, right? No, that's not the case. Democracy is not. That's why it's called ideology. Democracy is an ideology. It narrows down the complexities of the world, right? It believes in the absolute rightness. When democracy is not right, and you can't even claim to be right. Much in the same way Marxism is or liberalism is, right? They simplify the view of the world and they say what they are saying is right. And anyone who disagrees is evil. If you don't believe me, ask the people of Russia, right? I feel sorry for them, the Russians, or the Eastern Europeans. I feel their history is full of bloodshed and misery. I feel sorry for them. Ask them. They'll tell you what ideology is, right? If you don't believe me, right? So there you go. So it sees that the doctrine is absolutely right. And so, in a simpler form, ideology it basically tells in a simple manner, right, what is wrong with the world or what is wrong with the society, and then what can be done to resolve the problem, right? And because ideology inherently appeals to the emotions of a person, right? It appeals to the emotional view of the world. Hence, ideology becomes popular, right? Widely popular and accepted because it appeals more to the emotions, right? Oh, look at the poverty. Oh, look at the inequality. Oh, look at the injustice. Oh, it appeals to emotion. Like, oh yeah, that means what this democracy is right, or Marxism is right, or capitalism is right, or socialism is right, right? So it simplifies the world. It simplifies the problem. It simplifies the reality. It simplifies the actuality, and the solution for the people, right? And the solution is also simplified, and the people must just observe and digest it, right? Like there's no questions asked. And so some ideologue will say, oh, look at the world, something is wrong, I know what to do, right? Remove them, everything will be fine. Don't think too much, right? Don't think too much, I'll do the thinking for you, right? Remove all the complexities, the solution is just remove this, right? And everything will be fine. But then we tend to realize that the world is not simply like that, right? So what Burke understood was that this sort of ideological thinking, it gives a radical, a drastic momentum, right? A massive thrust or an impetus for mass action against the deemed enemy of the people that hinders the accomplishment of a utopian society, right? That's precisely what happens, right? That's what happened in during the Russian Revolution. That's what happened during the French Revolution, right? That's what actually happened in Ukraine, the Color Revolution, right? In Ukraine, what was it called the Orange Revolution, I think. Yes, that's exactly what happened during the Arab Spring, right? Same thing, the Arab Awakening. Yeah, I don't know what awoken them, but then yeah, that's what it's called, right? The Arab Spring. So there you go. They think that the solution, there's a problem. If you just get rid of that entity that's causing the problem, everything will be fine. Did that, nothing happened, right? So there we go. So what happens is that so what so what Burke is saying is that this is precisely what happened, right? This is precisely what happened, and this is actually what leads. This is actually what leads to that. This is actually what makes the ideology very, very dangerous, right? Very, very dangerous. And this is why we speak from the period of the French Revolution as the age of ideology, right? When we speak of the age of ideology, literally from the French Revolution, it starts. And that's also called the age of revolution, right? Burke saw, and he saw in crafts that in the coming ages, the social conflict and revolutions and wars among societies and nations will continue to be defined in an ideological term. Right now, again, this I want you to remember this. He saw. I think he was among the first to see this, and I think he was the first that in the coming ages, right, in the years to come, that the conflict and the revolutions and the wars will be defined in terms of ideology, in terms of an ideological terms, right? That's why today's war are essentially war of ideologies. Yes or no, right? Among the communists and the capitalists, democracy, Islam, right? It's all about ideology, right? conflicts and wars are waged in terms, not because they have anything to gain, maybe they do, but then whatever they have to gain is defined by the ideology, right? The ideology defines them what is to be gained, right? That's why during the Cold War, it was the communists, right? The ideology of communism versus the capitalists, right? Ideology. Or now, democracy, Western democracy, against, which is an ideology, democracy, against Islam, right? You see? And again, now again, you have democracy, the Western democracies versus communist China, right? I do hope China wins, right? And so, so there you go. So you have no. So he was the first to say that from in the coming ages, nations, I mean, revolutions, even the revolution is, in terms of ideology, right? The Arab Spring was in terms of democratic ideals, ideology, right? Even the Orange Revolution in Ukraine was in terms of ideology, right? So, and in fact, after Burke saw this, you saw the Russian Revolution, right? You see, all in terms of ideology. So that from now everything will be defined or everything will be colored from the lens of ideology, whatever ideology may be, right? They have essentially, even today's war have become essentially ideological, right? Now, now wars are now fought for ostensibly, right, fought to preserve and safeguard democracy, communism or fascism or nationalism or whatever. Even nationalism is itself an ideology, right? Nationalism is an ideology. So the whole world is now engulfed in a political battleground in which wars are now fought over ideal abstractions, right? Abstractions which aim at a total transformation of human condition, right? It 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 promises no matter what kind of ideology you have, all this ideology promises a total transformation of human condition. Obviously, when the ideology speaks of transformation, it only has good things to say, right? We're going to bring about a good transformation. All the transformation we bring, it will be good, right? That's what they say. That's what they promise. Democracy or communism or nationalism, right? So 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 this ideology, they promise, they aim to transform the human condition, and of course it did bring about a change in human condition, right? Look at Mao Zedong's China, how many people died, or Stalin's Soviet Union, right? Or Pol Pot's Cambodia, right? Just to name few, just to name few, right? That's all ideology, right? They did bring a total transformation of human conditions. Yeah, I agree. So Burke saw all this, right? He saw all this at a time when most of his friends, right, were thinking that the French Revolution was the ultimate culmination of the Glorious Revolution and the American Revolution. But they could not be more wrong, right? They could not be more wrong. All right. So this is Burke and his political thoughts. I hope that we have. I thought I do hope that we have learned something, right? Well, I always do. Reading through these political thinkers, it always makes me learn new things. So I guess we all learned, right, from this lecture. So thank you so much, and then I will see you soon. All right, take care.